Hey, what's up? All right, so last week, I'm just gonna jump right in. We made kind of a sci-fi panel door, or like a floor panel, and I gave you guys the STL for that. This week, I was thinking that we would make a window, and maybe a chair, something for diorama use, and um, what diorama doesn't need a window? You know, eventually you'll need to make one and 3D print one. And so, yeah, we'll jump right in. And if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. Um, and otherwise, yeah, we'll get rolling right now. So, a couple things that I like to do before I start building anything in Tinkercad or in any program is find a good reference image that you want to use. And so I found a reference image for a double hung window. This one is a 3D model, so it kind of helps in that I can see, where some of the bevels are, etc. Um, and there's a couple things you can do with 3D printing. You know, it's easy to sand something you 3D printed. So having a corner rounded in your model sometimes isn't necessary. Sometimes you could get away with doing that post processing when you're sanding and that type of thing. So it just really depends on what you want to do, how you want to do that. And um, windows are fairly straightforward unless you make one that can open, and we'll definitely do that. But we won't do that right this minute or right now. We'll do that probably like at an advanced step. Show you how to make one that will open. But to make one where it does connect in these parts right here, and I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor or not. Maybe you can't. But we'll start in Tinkercad with just a square and make sure I have this setting in inches, and I do. We'll make this window about 3.5 inches wide, and we'll go with a little bit longer. So we'll say maybe let's go 4.5 wide, and we'll make the frame first. So we'll move this down to something like 1/8 to start off with, or maybe 1/4. We can make it a little bit thicker now, so we can work with it and then switch it. So again, we're going to want to duplicate this rather than copying and paste it. So that's Control D. And we want to move this up, turn this into a hole, and then we're going to want to shrink this. And you probably want to change your size setting for this. So probably something along the lines of 1/64 would work. And then we'll grab the top box here, hold Shift, and scale this down a little bit until it feels like it fits for a frame. Go a little bit more than that. Wow, hard to control right now. That looks pretty good. So we'll use that to start, and then we'll just scale this up, run it all the way through, and we'll combine those two right now. So there we got our basic frame. And again, I'm going to go ahead and change the color just because I like working in the white color a little bit better. And to make the window to go inside, like I said, there's a couple ways that we can do this. The biggest thing we want to create when we're modeling something, especially for a diorama that we're going to paint, is to give it some depth. That's the biggest thing. So that's the one thing if you get a diorama from somebody like C Goosey or Oilers Workshop, or one of those guys that are really really good at making dioramas, they always have crazy levels of depth. It's always a place that you can shove a paint in, or black wash or something like that to give it that depth. So we'll go ahead and do that. And what we'll do for this one is we'll bring another square in, And we're going to want to line this one up. Basically the inner size of the frame. It doesn't matter right now if it's a little bit longer. It's probably actually better because we're just going to combine this in there when we print it anyway. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and shrink this down. So this one's going to have to be definitely thinner because you're going to want to sit it in here. Where I'm pretending that this is this is the front. Okay, this is going to be the front of the window. So we want some depth in there. We could probably even go a little bit more than that. Something like this looks good. And then we're going to want to make this, the window seals, and we'll, go back and look. 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, no problem. Go ahead and grab our square, and let's see if we can fit 3 in here first. I'm not sure that we can. All right, so we definitely can't, but we can grab these 3 and we can shrink them all down at the same time, holding shift, and we'll move these over. That's probably going to be fine. I'll go ahead and switch views here so we can look at this. I'll line these out. Make sure these are the same width. They're not right now. So I just would bring this up to the edge, something like this, and then just 1, 2, 3, count it over. Make sure you got 3 on the other side by doing the same thing. Bring it over to the edge. It's not there yet. Keep checking. Not there yet. Looks like it's there. 1, 2, 3. Combine these so you have the shapes combined, and then we can go ahead and align them to make sure that they are in fact in the middle of the window. I'm going to grab these and duplicate them. Control D, shift and arrow down. Control D again, and one more time, and so that will give us a decent window frame. You want to be careful to 3D print this part right here. We got to make sure that we have enough width there, or else we're just gonna snap it when we print it, or it's gonna get snapped in when the suction of the actual 3D printer. So I think we probably need to go just a little bit smaller on these guys, but we're just gonna rock it. We're just gonna go for it right now. Grab this and grab the red inner frame, combine those, and voila. Now we have our window frame. But see, I kind of messed up, and that's good too. I'm gonna go ahead and undo that. I did not actually align this center. Oops. Nope, I don't want that. I did not align these guys center with the inner frame. So now we should be good. And we'll grab this unit and the frame, and wabam. So there's kind of the inner workings of a window, that simple. One of the things I would probably do if I was 3D printing this, I'd make sure that this was flat, unless you need the back not to be flat for some reason. I guess actually you'd probably want to put plastic or some type of window effect behind there. So actually we might need to shrink this a little bit. Bring it up just a little bit so we can actually set some in there. One of the things I might do if I was going to do that is I'd also maybe make a little notch in the seal itself. I don't think that's necessary because we have a pretty thick border around the inner part of the window. So you should be able to get something in there and glued pretty easily. This will print pretty well 3D printed, although you will have to print this. I'd probably print this flat, and I'd run supports on the back side here just to make sure that all of this printed printed well if you're not going to be able to print flat. Now, if you want to print flat, which is actually better, and you just want to glue your plastic to the back of this, then I would just bring it down. I'd bring this down until it was even with the back of this, and we're gonna have to change our settings here to do that, but close in my that's fairly close. And then I'd combine those, and then I'd print it flat, and then you wouldn't have to worry about any supports at all. Now, if you wanted to make these where they have a little bit of decoration on them, or if you wanted to add, you know, the window frame that's on the outside of them, that's easy to do as well. We can certainly go through how to do that. Oh, I'd start with the square, and I'd shrink this down, because this actually is going to sit up here, right? That's how they usually work. And something like this. And this will kind of be on the outside of the wall. That's how this would work. Move this over here to where it's actually by the window. And let's see if I can actually get this to work. I drag this across. Let's do this a little bit more. There we go. And I'd center this with the outside of the window. And then if you wanted to be really fancy, you could grab a cube this way, rotate it 45 to get your diagonal cut here. And zoom in and make sure you get it right on the corner, because that's where these babies go. Looks pretty good. Grab your cube, grab that, and voila. Now obviously this is going to have to sit over this way more. And then this is going to have to be stretched much longer. So I messed that up already, but that's okay. Can kind of see what we'd do, right? So we'd grab this, and I'll fix it here in a minute, but grab it, duplicate it that way. I'd mirror it. Well, I'd rotate it this way, and then I'd mirror it. And we'd line that up just like this. Now, obviously, we'd have to make both of these much longer, but that would be the outside of your frame, and you could paint those to look like wood, and you would be pretty successful in being able to paint those to make it look just like it was an outside of a window. If you wanted to add some, hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, just throw them in the chat. But if you wanted to add some kind of more detail on the inside, you want to make this look a little bit better, you can always grab one of the roof tools, like one of the rounded pieces here, stretch this out, and then I bring this down to where it started to look there we go. Started to look a little bit more like it was, of course, rounded here. Oh, grab it. Let's move it over here. See this on a lot of windows where it's kind of rounded. This will probably need to still be a little bit smaller. Even smaller. This is for me a lot of times if I don't know what if I haven't made something before and I want, to kind of struggle through it, sometimes it's just trial and error to get some of this right. But once you start really knowing the shapes that you want to make and that you've made the shapes a few times, you'll build up a library of the shapes you want, just not only in memory, but you can save some as well. I'll show you guys how to do that. I do that quite often, especially if it's like a shape cutter. I'll save it, and this is a new account, so I don't have any of those, so we'll go ahead and make one of those so I can show you guys that. But then I'm just going to grab this and duplicate it. You can move this guy over and center it on this piece. And we'll get a little bit of fancier window, and obviously we can spin one of these guys this way. I'm going to shorten this up. And you can take this all the way to the frame if you want. I've seen that on some of the windows, especially like some of the windows in New York City that I've looked at, that I've referenced, have this. These will go all the way down to the window frame here. I like kind of cutting them off right here. It's a personal preference, I guess. And I will go ahead and move these into place. Grab all this, change the color to, let's say, gray. And there we go. Add a little bit of detail in there. That's going to grab a little bit of shadow, when someone's lighting it up, and it's going to grab a little bit of extra paint or dry brush, and you're going to be able to make that stand out and pop just a little bit more. I always think that looks the best when it's done that way. So there's window, pretty easy. Like I said, we can, make these a little bit more advanced by making a top panel and a bottom panel, and then cutting a groove on the side and actually making the window where it will open up. And we can definitely do that. But basically that's how I'd make something that I wanted to print a window out with. I would, throw this on the printer, print this out. This could go into a diorama pretty much immediately. And you could, like I said, I have used microscope slides, which are real glass. You can cut them and break them, and they look like broken windows. Obviously, any type of plastic from packaging, and just hot glue it on the back, and you have yourself a set of windows. A lot of times the windows too will have, this piece underneath. I don't even know what this is called. Anyone know what this is called? But you have this piece that sits underneath, right? Of like an apartment window. I'd print that separately probably. One of the things you could do if you wanted it to sit down in there really well is copy your window frame by Control D, duplicate it so we don't have to move it, turn it into a hole, line this and the hole up, come in here and make sure that you got it the depth that you want it. You can do that by seeing here, and maybe bring this up a little bit more. Not much, but a little bit. Maybe something like this. And then obviously this has to be flat on the back, so we're going to move this up just a little bit to make sure that it cuts through. Oh, not that. This. So we want to sit flat. So right like this. Grab the hole, turn this back into a solid. Oh, zigged when I should have zagged. This needs to be turned back into a solid. Grab this and a solid and try this again. And now we should have a nice spot for that window to sit right in there. So we can glue this right onto the edge. The window will sit in there, slot in there really, really nicely. You probably have to sand this a little bit because 3D printing, there's about, I don't know, 0.2 millimeters sometimes is the tolerance level, depending on the printer you're using. And yeah, ledge, I think maybe that's what it's called. Yeah, I think it is like a window ledge. You see these on apartment buildings and warehouses like all the time. And but I would do something like this just so that it could be secured in there. A lot of times what you're going to end up doing though is having to sand these a little bit just to make it fit. But I prefer to do that. That way you can actually get a really tight fit. Again, we'll change the color of this to like a dark gray, and you'd see this sitting in a window. Put this in with your brick, and you've got pretty decent window to go with. Does that make sense? How we get there? I mean, windows are not too hard in the grand scheme of things, but you end up making them a lot. And I've always struggled. I tried to make these for a long time with just using foam or wood, like little dowel rods or stir sticks or something. And these are the parts right here that make it difficult, right? These parts where these connect, these are almost impossible to get done where they look really, really good on something besides a 3D printer. But yeah, that's how I would rock a window. I'm gonna move this out of the way, and obviously we'd need to combine this, so let me go ahead and do that real fast. Combine this. So it can be exported and export. Now if I brought this into, well, I mean, I can go ahead and do that. Let me do that so you can get an idea of this. If I exported this as an STL, fabulous something or other. Okay. And then I brought this into Blender. Let me hide Mr. Krasinski. I think it was this one. Ah, there it is. Hiding on us. I use this scene in Blender because I already have the lighting set up and I have an infinity wall set up, so it makes it kind of easy to see these models a little bit better. If I were to bring this in and rotate this and say, let's actually get this minus 90 and minus 90. Give this just a simple that's not the color I wanted. Simple brown, something along the lines of this. We bring this in. You get the idea. So I mean, it's a pretty solid model. You could also use this in a render pretty easily, but that's with shadows, right? So this is how it would look potentially. I like to bring it into Blender just to see how light would hit it, but this is kind of how it would look if you 3D printed it and painted it with black wash where there's, shadows and stuff like that. Oh, the nose. Yeah, Krasinski's nose. Actually, he's one of the harder people I've ever had to 3D model. He's got a really bizarre nose. Not only is his nose kind of wide at the end, like down at the bottom, but his nostrils are not even either. Like one of them sits up higher, one of them sits down lower, and then one of them is not as open as much. Oh man, that was rough. We'll get into that. I'm sure someday we'll jump in there if anybody wants to learn how to sculpt. But yeah, that's a rough one. This is exactly how I would print it, and I'll actually print one of these this week. I'll print this, and um, I mean this is gonna print. This is gonna print like fine. Now see, there is a gap here, so one of the things we'll need to do is when we go back into Tinkercad, is we'll need to make sure that that gap is not there. And there it is. Definitely there is a gap there. So now I've got this all combined. So one of the things I'll need to do is ungroup it and ungroup it again. And this is the problem that sometimes you run into. If you've grouped things too many times or too much, I reset this all the way back to the beginning. So you need to be careful. You need to remember how you actually divided things or grouped things to begin with, or else you'll end up in a mess. Um, I've done that a few times where I've basically had to start all over. Now this inner frame and these can be, I think maybe they're already combined. Is that right? Nope, they're not. Alright, so I'm going to grab all of this right here. That should grab it all. There's 6, that's right. Group these, and you can see the gap right here. And a good way to do that is change the color. And when we have the red here, change it to dark, and you can see already, we can see the blue in there. So I'd grab this, and I'd just move it over. That will definitely be a printer fail, 100%. And I'll have to go on this side and make sure that I didn't make the window too small. The other thing you can do is grab your window, grab your frame, and make sure that it is actually centered. And it looks like we should be good now. I don't want to give you guys a 3D model that does not work. Oh, not at the bottom, okay. And go look at the top here, and we're good. So now we actually have a full 3D model that you can print. And this will be manifold, so you don't have to worry about that. Hey, I appreciate that, Paul. Yeah, I definitely like sculpting. I really like modeling hard surfaces even more. Um, yes. So the like if I bring this new one down, right? So if I if I just use the arrow key, it's gonna move in whatever increment I have it set to. So if I go to 112, it's gonna move in 112. If I use shift, it is a much larger move. So it's the if you're trying to move something a long distance, and let's say you're like at 1/32, I just block's gone, and you're trying to like move it, and you're like, oh, I don't want to, just shift is going to give you a bigger movement, and it does snap. I think it might be double, but I don't remember 100% if it's double, but I think it is double. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's gonna be way more than that. Okay, so that's it's quite a bit further. But yeah, it's just so you can move at a quicker. I just use it to move at a quicker distance, a further distance.